A coffee that used to cost $2 is now $5. Rent that once felt manageable now eats half a paycheck. Groceries rise every month. Insurance rises. Electricity rises. Healthcare rises. Education rises. And every time you ask why, you get the same answer. One word: inflation. But here is what that word is designed to hide. Between 2020 and 2023, the United States alone injected over $6 trillion into the economy. The European Central Bank added trillions more. Central banks around the world expanded their balance sheets to levels never seen in peacetime history. That money went somewhere. And where it went is exactly why your life feels more expensive every single year. Because prices are not rising by accident. They are rising by design. So ask yourself this: why does everything keep getting more expensive? In a world where technology is supposed to make life cheaper, we have better logistics, artificial intelligence, automation, global supply chains that can move a product from a factory in Vietnam to your door in 4 days. By pure logic, prices should fall. Efficiency should make life easier, not harder. But the opposite happened, and it didn't happen by accident. The modern economy no longer primarily rewards affordability. It rewards owning the layers people cannot avoid. And once you understand that principle, rising prices stop looking like chaos. They start looking like the system working exactly as designed. The question is not why prices rise. The real question is, who benefits when they do? To understand where this started, you have to go back to a decision made decades ago. After World War II, the global economy was rebuilt on a simple premise: when growth slows, stimulate. When markets panic, inject liquidity. When crises hit, print more money, and worry about the consequences later. This worked for a while, but it created a trap. People believe their currency is stable because the number on the bill doesn't change. A $50 bill still says $50. But what it buys quietly shrinks every single year. That is the invisible tax, the one that never appears on any government document, the one that transfers wealth from people who hold cash to people who hold assets. Then came 2008. The financial crisis forced central banks further than they had ever gone before. The Federal Reserve dropped interest rates to near zero and began buying assets directly. The logic was simple: flood the system with cheap money to prevent collapse. It worked. The collapse was avoided. But the money had to go somewhere. And then came 2020. The pandemic triggered the largest monetary expansion in modern history. The US money supply grew by over 40% between 2020 and 2022. 40%. That had never happened before outside of wartime. 40% more money, chasing roughly the same amount of goods. The result was not a mystery, it was mathematics. But monetary expansion is only half the story. Because once companies realized that consumers had been conditioned to accept higher prices, pricing stopped being reactive. It became a science. Shrinkflation, same price, smaller product. Chocolate bars that quietly lost 15% of their weight. Cereal boxes that got taller, but lighter. Subscription models, converting one-time purchases into permanent monthly extractions. Software, music, television, fitness, even cars. Toyota experimented with charging a monthly fee to unlock heated seats that were already physically installed in the vehicle. Dynamic pricing, charging more based on demand, time, weather, or location. What used to be called price gouging in emergencies became standard practice in normal markets. convenience fees, service fees, processing fees, resort fees. The product doesn't always improve, but the pricing architecture becomes more sophisticated every year. And the psychological mechanism is always the same: increase the cost slowly enough that resistance never peaks. People don't revolt against 100 small increases. They adapt, they normalize, they absorb. Here is where it all connects. When central banks create new money and inject it into the financial system, that money does not flow first into wages, it flows into assets. Real estate, stocks, private equity, infrastructure, land. Between 2012 and 2022, U.S. home prices increased by over 120%. Stock markets in developed economies roughly tripled. The people who owned assets before the expansion became dramatically wealthier. The people who didn't own assets got left further behind. But here is where it becomes a closed loop. Higher asset prices flow downstream into everyday life. Landlords raise rent to maintain returns on more expensive properties. Companies raise prices to satisfy investors, demanding higher margins. Governments raise taxes to service the debt created by stimulus. Insurance companies raise premiums because replacement costs have risen. By the time inflation reaches you at the consumer level, it is already compounded through every layer of the financial system. You are not just paying more for a product, you are paying for the financialization of everything behind it. Here is what almost no mainstream analysis will tell you directly. Prices are rising in specific sectors because scarcity has become a deliberate business model. In housing, zoning laws and permitting restrictions limit supply in the most desirable cities. The result: existing property owners benefit from rising prices while new buyers are priced out. And the people who write the zoning laws are often the people who own the most property. In healthcare, complexity is profitable. The United States spends more per capita on healthcare than any other developed nation, and gets worse outcomes on most metrics. That gap is not inefficiency. It is the cost of a system optimized for billing, not healing. In education, the availability of student loans allowed universities to raise tuition indefinitely, knowing that demand was guaranteed by government-backed credit. The price rose to meet the available financing. The pattern is always the same. Efficiency gains from technology exist, but they are captured at the ownership layer before they ever reach you. Progress happened. The benefit was redirected. Now look at where this trajectory leads. As artificial intelligence and automation replace labor across more industries, wages for routine work face permanent downward pressure. At the same time, the owners of AI systems, data infrastructure, and automated production capture an increasing share of economic output. That creates a structural divergence. The cost of living, housing, healthcare, education, energy continues to rise because these sectors are dominated by asset owners with pricing power. The income available to pay for those costs grows slowly or stagnates for most workers. The result is not collapse, it is compression. A world where people work harder every year just to maintain yesterday's standard of living. Where home ownership becomes a generational privilege rather than a reasonable expectation. Where healthcare becomes a financial decision as much as a medical one. Where the gap between those who own the systems and those who depend on them widens quietly, year after year, without any single dramatic moment that forces a reckoning. Not oppression through force, compression through permanent financial pressure. . The strategic lesson is the most important thing you can take from this. In the modern economy, the winning position is not selling products at the consumer level. It is owning the layers that become unavoidable. Housing, energy, data, payments, healthcare, education, infrastructure. The more unavoidable the layer, the more permanent the pricing power. That is why the most powerful entities in the world don't primarily sell desire. They sell dependency. For individuals navigating this system, the lesson is not despair. It is repositioning. Own appreciating assets if you can access them, even small ones. Build skills that are genuinely scarce and difficult to automate. Reduce dependency on the most financialized layers where pricing power is most concentrated. Understand that in this system, consumers absorb inflation. Owners redirect it. The difference between those two positions is not income, it is understanding. And understanding is where repositioning begins. So why is everything becoming more expensive? Not because of bad luck, not because of incompetent governments, not because of simple greed. Because rising prices are the natural output of a system where money creation inflates assets. Corporations engineer dependency. Scarcity is protected when it's profitable, and efficiency gains are captured before they ever reach you. This is not just inflation. It is the price of living inside systems built to monetize the distance between what you need and what you can afford. And once you understand that, you stop asking why prices rise. You start asking who designed the system that makes them rise. Now, we have talked about how money is created, diluted, and redirected through financial systems. But what happens when an entire nation decides to use that same logic? Not just to buy companies, not just to buy influence, but to buy the future itself. Saudi Arabia is not just investing. They are executing one of the most ambitious economic strategies in modern history, acquiring stakes in sports, technology, entertainment, agriculture, and infrastructure across dozens of countries simultaneously. And almost nobody is talking about the full scale of what that means. That is the next video. Subscribe now and turn on notifications. Because by the time most people understand what Saudi Arabia is doing, the positions will already be locked in. Titan theory, where invisible systems shape visible reality.